Onassis Foundation. Dublab.
Welcome to the Quarantine Tapes, a daily podcast from Onassis LA and Dublab. Hosted by Paul Holdengraber, this series chronicles shifting paradigms in the era of social distancing.
Greetings. This is Paul Holdengraber, your host for the Quarantine Tapes, brought to you by Onassis LA and Dublab. I am thrilled to announce that we have asked various former Quarantine Tapes guests to host during a week guests of their choice in total freedom. They have absolute carte blanche. This week I have asked the wonderful writer Walter Mosley to serve as our guide and guest host. I do hope you will enjoy Mosley's choices for this week on the Quarantine Tapes. Thank you so much for listening.
Hello, Nikky Finney. How are you today?
Oh, Walter Mosley. It is so good to hear your voice. What a question. You know, like in this moment of quarantine, I am always so grateful for the human voice to enter my quiet house. Sometimes I forget to talk and I start talking to myself, don't tell anyone. And my cats suddenly look at me like, oh, you can do that. And so for you to ask me that question that I take very seriously, all questions from you, I take very seriously. I am quiet. I'm here. It's the 8th of January, 2021. I'm alive. I'm COVID-free for now. Fingers crossed, heart crossed. I've never felt, I'm 63 years old. I've never felt younger, never felt stronger. I'm terrified. I'm furious. I'm determined. The cosmos is spinning as it always does every morning that I wake up. I was thinking about the animals this morning, the caribou and the black bear. You have to know how complicated I am to know that I give great and long thought to the animal kingdom and queendom, the coyote, keeping their eyes on us to make sure we don't completely implode this beautiful planet. That's how I am. You asked me this question, so I have to answer it like a poet. Yesterday, I woke up to the news, that an armed insurrection had, in the name of the 45th president of the United States, was happening at the Capitol. I don't like TV. I had to sit in front of that device and watch this in an unbelievable state of disbelief. And then I woke up today to the news that it was Stephen Hawking, his birthday. Stephen Hawking had a incredible impact upon me. The great physicist, the great narrator of the black hole and time travel. His birthday is today, and that meant a lot to me. And that's what I meant by the cosmos spinning. It's like one day it spins you in one direction, the next day it spins you in another direction. And so I'm here.
Well,
How are you?
I'm glad to have you here, and okay. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm very busy, which is great to be COVID. I wanted to say a few things at the beginning of our little conversation, in ways of just saying, what I'm thinking, and also, kind of a minor introduction of you, or at least of what I think of you, you know. I'm really glad to be able to talk to you today. And as you know, I've followed you and your works for many years. And in my opinion, you are one of the world's great poets. And that's oh so important right now, because poetry is one of the few arts that cut to the bone, that struggle to swallow the most bitter pill of mortality, which is the truth. I've been talking to people this week about the time of COVID-19, asking if there's any hope, if we can make a better world out of the wreck that has foundered and killed so many. I think it's fitting that my last interview, done 3 others this week, be with a poet, because poets spend days and decades trying to understand the human heart, its desires, and what modicum of satisfaction we can achieve in these fleeting moments of life. And so in the simplest possible terms, I ask you, who are we in these times? Where, in your opinion, do our footsteps lead? And what truths do you imagine surround us that we remain unaware of? And I'm asking you those questions, but I'm more than happy to discuss them also.
Good, because I need you in this conversation. We need, I think, those questions are oh so relevant, oh so important, oh so impossible to be answered by one poet, which is one of the things I love about conversation. Mm-hmm. I take my job and my responsibility as a poet so seriously, and feel so fortunate to have, for people to call me a poet, for my work in the world, the good work. You know, I come from people whose work, let my work speak for me. You know this, Walter. You come from people who taught you, let my work speak for me. You know, like my name may disappear, all the things you give me or don't give me disappear, but let that live on. And to be a poet in the world, I'm completely humbled by that job and completely thrilled and passionate about it, because I know I will die with words on my lips. I know that I will never finish my responsibility to this vocation, to all the partial phrasings and moments that I fall in love with words, and I won't have time to finish it, but that doesn't matter. Somebody else, as I was taught, will come behind me and do their part. Lorraine Hansberry said, you know, if there's anybody who thinks as I think and can come in and put your commas, I'm saying this poorly, and add your periods to this, do so. Mm-hmm. And I literally I believed her, and I do believe her, and I still in this moment of having lived twice as long as Lorraine Hansberry lived, know that somebody will come behind me and do the same. But, you know, the thing that I am struck by as a poet right now is probably the thing that matters so much to me about humankind and about humanity, and has mattered to me for the last 40 years of my moving my hand across the page. And that is, if you want, I am a poet of my time, Walter. I really invest in that fact. I was born and was raised in the South of this country, this republic, when it was on fire, when war was happening in the state I was born in and was happening in the country that I lived in. So there was this war, this racial violence that was happening around me. And then there was the Vietnam War. And I feel like I am a child of war. I have grown up around embattlements, and I don't care, you know, what kind of house I live in. I don't care how well I'm doing. I'm always thinking of human beings as people at war with each other, literally, but I'm also the poet who understands that I grew up in a house of love. And I grew up in a community that taught me, don't you dare answer to some name that somebody calls you who does not know your heart, who does not know you were shaped and formed in this tiny little village made of people who were brutalized and beat up and turned away from the turnstile that kept going forward, and taught me you have to be twice as good, 3 times as good, and don't you ever forget that love made you. And that's a really important fact for me as a poet of my time in this world today, because I find that we're still at war. We're still at war about the same ridiculous, stupid things that I was raised, that was happening around me when I was raised up in this world. And as a woman, as a mature woman, going into the last 50 years of my life, I'm still on the battlefield. And it is my responsibility as a poet to look at us as human beings, but to also talk about the fact that things in our very different lives in this republic, in this country, have made us very different human beings. My experiences as a Black girl, Black woman growing up in the South have given me entree into something that I know very well, that I speak of, because it is very important to me to put that perspective into the human circle. And so that's really important for me to do. And so as the poet, I can't talk in general language. I can't make this, even though there is one human race, there are many different experiences in that circle. And so my responsibility is to be true to it, is to look it in its eye as I look at other people who lived a certain kind of way, and then talk about, as a teacher, I talk about the wide circle of poets, not just the ones that won awards and not just the ones that look a certain way, but the wide circle of poets who have experienced different things as human beings. That is why I'm a teacher. That's who I want my students to know. And that responsibility is one of the great responsibilities in my life. And it's one of the great responsibilities that I have as a working poet. Like right now, when I'm thinking about Stephen Hawking and the black holes and time travel and Octavia Butler in the 1980s, predicting we would be right where we are, politically speaking, the prescient kind of view she had of the separation of human beings in terms of haves and have-nots, people living behind walls, how technology would divide us. It is my responsibility and job as a poet, because James Baldwin has already said to the universe, it is the poet who knows what it means to be a human being. I am not British. I was not sainted. I don't know what that feels like to be in royalty in that particular arena. But when James Baldwin said that, I stood up. I was like, there it is. There is my responsibility. If it is my responsibility, James Baldwin says, to tell us what it is like to love, what it is like to hate, what it is like to be loved, what it is like to feel hatred for someone, to feel the disillusionment of being whoever we are in the world, then I'm going to go, that's where I'm going to stand for the rest of my life. And that's where I am right now.
I like that, because I think the way I look at it is that poets know what it is to try to understand being human. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, and a lot of times, and the answer's never, the question's never answered.
Right.
Because we go on and on and on, but every day we get up and we say, well, let's try to do that again.
Right.
And I think that all people do, which is why I say we. But there's another thing you were talking about that I just want to go into, because it's just been something I've been thinking about lately. When we talk about COVID-19, it's a very interesting, global experience. People are dying. People are getting sick. People are afraid of dying and afraid of getting sick. The people have found new ways to address making vaccines, which they didn't really completely know before. They kind of hypothesized about it, but they didn't know it. But all of a sudden, between the computer and between DNA, all of a sudden, making a vaccine becomes an extraordinarily interesting thing. And when I was thinking about that, I was thinking, wow, that this follows what you were saying. Technology really grows. Technology and technique really grow during times of war. And I'm watching it grow. And I'm thinking, wow, COVID-19 is like a true world war. Going through that war, the responses are, gigantic and of great depth. And so when you talk about, like being, raised in a time of war, which I completely agree with you on that. I think right now it's not just us, it's everybody who's in that war. And I'm not sure everybody understands that, which is so nice to hear you talk about being in a war, we're always in a war. Reminds me of June Jordan and, in her memoir. So, she, from the beginning, she was at war with a father who loved her and who she loved deeply. And I think that's how I'm feeling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I do. I think I do. And I think because Stephen Hawking, maybe he's just on my mind this morning, but he has this quote where he says something like, be sure, how does he say that? Be sure you remember to look up at the stars and not down at your feet. And then he goes on to say this thing about curiosity. He would give these one-liners and I would go, oh. And I would say, yeah, but even though Stephen Hawking gets that, he gets that byline, he gets that his name is associated with that beautiful quote. My grandmother, my aunt, Baby Toy used to say, pick your head up, girl. Why are you looking like that? Make sure your chin is above water and all these. And so all these people whose names don't get to be associated with very important daily rituals. Look at the sky. Keep your eyes up. 400 years you've been in embattlement. Black people and COVID-19. You can stretch back and cite 100 cases where Black people were the butt of experiment so that Western medicine and vaccines and medicine could grow to the level that it's grown. Tuskegee, study, all those things. So Walter, at the moment, you are absolutely right that we are all affected by this. COVID-19 does not care, right, what you look like or what house you live in or what your bank account says and how many zeros behind your check. It doesn't care about that. But, and this is where I think poetry and art and humanity have to be willing to look at what the artist has to say. And this goes back to Baldwin. But if you're a frontline worker, if you don't have to, like me, I get to sit in my house, teach from a computer. I go out once a week and get my groceries. I am not, it is math that says that I am not putting myself in harm's way, the virus, as much as the young sister down at the Walgreens who has to go to work. She can't do her work from a computer. Yeah. So it affects us differently. The fact that Black and brown people don't have primary care doctors in the same number or access to healthcare affects those communities way differently. So yes, it affects us all, but like everything else in this republic, things break down around money and skin color. That's the war. That's the great war we are not willing to call a war.
I agree with you. I would add gender.
Yes.
That's another issue that goes along with that.
Absolutely.
But looking for optimism, which is what I do. Looking for optimism, one says, wow, so you, the guy on the other, side who's, angry and screaming and throwing rocks and stuff, and we actually have the same problems. When you get down to the basis of it, that a poor, white laborer who's, has, many things, many strikes against him or her, and a poor black or brown or Asian or whatever, we don't have the same experience, but many of our problems are the same. And the thing that I keep trying to to remember and go to, I just wrote an article for The Nation recently, saying that and a poet would like this. I was talking about language, and I'm saying, look, yes, we all know what defund the police means. It means that we need a different way to deal with people on the streets in this world today. We need a different way. We need a different education. We need different rules and responsibilities among people. But for me, saying defund the police is in a way an aggressive use of language, and I'd like to change that. Now, I could be wrong, but I would like to change it. I would like to say, hey, listen. We need a better system in order for everybody to get an equal share here. And I wrote that, and it was in The Nation. And but then a few weeks later, Obama said the same thing, almost exactly, But I'm sure he hadn't read my thing. But it's a thought. It's in the ether. He said it and was really attacked by progressives who seem, and these progressives who attacked him seem to want to say, well, no, there's a difference. We're fighting them, and I'm not fighting anybody. I'm trying to make the world work. And if you have a problem, well, let's talk about that problem. Let's do something about that problem, because most of us, either we're poor, we're black, or we're poor and we're black and we're a woman, or we're poor and white and a woman, or there's all kinds of people who are experiencing the same issues. I mean, what do you think of that?
And we have to, yes, but I think and we must put sexuality and next to gender and in that whole pot that we're talking about, because that's an important category as well. But I think the thing that, I agree with you, and yet I also say, in terms of optimism, I am always wonderfully accused of being optimistic. I wear my hat well, but I will also not shy away from saying or looking at the hard thing that still divides this country, the hard thing that people in power, in places of governance, in places of making real hard decisions about what can make this place so much better, people do not want to look at those truths, right? So It's not just about, for me, when you're talking about defund the police and the responsibilities that must come in terms of dealing with people, in urban areas or in the street, I think is how you said it. It also is not just what happens to the people, dealing with people in the street. It's the police. The police must do some deep diving into their own, images of humanity. Who can scale a wall, Walter? Who can scale a wall with a Confederate flag in their hand and not be bothered, not be stopped? Who can not walk down the street in a true protest, wanting truth and fairness, and for you to stop killing the people and be brutalized with tear gas and tanks and army uniforms? This is what I'm talking about. If we don't look at the differences between us in order to get to the similarities in our hearts and our souls, we'll never get there. This experiment will be an experiment for another 400 years.
No, there's no question about that. I'm not trying to say in that racism doesn't exist, or that many of the different issues don't exist. I'm not trying to say that, but what I'm thinking of, listen, well before I met you, I went to a reading. I don't even remember what it was. It was in New York. You were doing a reading.
Right. I remember that reading. I remember, and I'm going to talk about that precisely. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go on.
Okay. That's all right. I mean, I'm interested in what you think of, but I was at the reading, and you were there in one of your many different appearances. You were an Afro-Latchian poet. And you were reading reading poetry about being in Kentucky and being among the Appalachians, and you were talking about a guy. It was a white guy, and he was listening to country music, and he's driving a pickup truck, and there was a lot of differences between you and that guy that you were imagining, but also there was a lot of similarities.
Yes.
And listen, I understand there's a battle, between the races, but it does seem to me that we're at a point in time where the similarities really outweigh those differences, and we have to make things happen. And when I say we, I don't mean Black people. I mean everybody. Does that? I mean, I'm trying to explain where I'm coming from in saying that, and where in my understanding of you, where you understand your connection to a world that's certainly you're a Black woman from the South in America, but also you're this human being, cavorting with coyotes and caribou, Amen.
Walter, you are human beings are very complicated. And sometimes I don't think we exercise enough complicated muscles. Here's an example. I'm doing a talk next week at Pacific University MFA program. And one of the people who was going to introduce me, she wrote me a very short little note, and she said, I'm reading all your work, and I'm getting ready to do write the introduction. And she said, I had one question for you. She said, in your new book, Love Child's Hotbed of Occasional Poetry, what is most interesting to me is that in the midst of that war and that upheaval and that violence of the 1960s, your parents created an oasis of love and beauty for you to thrive and blossom in. Boom. That's the question. And so she said, here's my question. Sometimes as artists, we make space, right, we focus on the difficulty. We focus on the violence. We focus on the suffering and the horror. She said, how do you make space for the beautiful in the midst of all of this? And I thought, this woman has just asked me to write my birth certificate out for her. This is my job. My job in the midst of a country that looks at me as a problem because I'm Black, because I'm outspoken, because I don't mind looking you in the eye and saying that's racist. And in the same breath, my parents and my family said, you will be the love child. You will not allow them to turn your heart or to turn you away from what we taught you, not what the country saw you as, not what they want you to be. And I wrote this line that I love. I said something like a country, I said, focusing on the trauma, focusing on what the victim they want me to be. A country that would rather have me speak with blood running out of my mouth rather than speak from the quarry of love that my people gifted me. I refuse that. I refuse that every day of my life. But that does not reduce the fact that blood has been running out of my mouth and the mouths of my people for 400 years. I will speak of that. And then I will do this. And this is the turn that I mean, Walter. And this is the turn that you can't always teach a young writer, a young poet to do because they get entrenched. They want to rant on the top of the table about the violence and the hatred, which is real. But your job as a writer and an artist is to stand on that table and to talk about the truth of that. Don't romanticize it. Don't hallmark it. Look it in its eye. And you must also make something with it that does something that moves us forward as a humankind. If you don't do that, I'm not interested in your work. I am not interested in spending my precious time with your words, because you are sitting in the war. You are sitting in the violence, and you are not, extricating yourself from that to do something with it and to speak of it as a person who understands that we must tell each other the truth. We must look each other in the eye. We must realize we didn't have the same upbringing and the same benefits and the same privileges that allow us a certain view of the world. But that doesn't mean I can only be with people who are like me. That's the problem. That's where we are right now. We are, we're on these electronic things, and we're only talking to people like us.
Yeah, well, that's a big problem. Yeah,
that's a big problem. We have to reach over the boundary, beyond those kinds of things, and realize, yes, in spirit, there is a humankind, and yet we can all come with different experiences here. And that's where art comes in. That's where art teaches us we're different, but we're the same. We're different, but we're alike. And that's why the preciousness of good books and good art and good conversations about that should not ever be taken off the table. For me, it's the connections that keep us moving toward a better world, even though we haven't gotten there yet.
I mean, it's so interesting, when you talk about that, because, a lot of people, we're in America, and America, it's a contradictory ends with itself. One side, it's about democracy, and the other side, it's about capitalism. They're not the same thing at all.
No.
And there's a war, a battle there, but in a country where, where you talk about, wealth, let's say, they were born, wealthy. They were born with a silver spoon in their mouth. The silver spoon is actually the thing that you were talking about. It's the love of the house, the love for you, the love for self, the love for who we are as a race, as a gender, as a people, all those things. Right. And somebody else, Donald Trump is a great example of this, born into money,
right?
Millionaire money.
Right.
He's actually completely impoverished.
Right.
He's completely, yes. And so he's out there, and somebody says, well, I wish I was that person. Somebody, I was talking to a writer, I talk to writers sometimes. One of them was talking to me and saying, well, I wish I had what Stephen King has. And I said, well, he has macular degeneration. You want that?
Mm-hmm.
No. I just want his success. I said, no. You take it all, or you don't take any of it.
Right.
I said, he's, a wonderful writer, and he's important and all this other stuff. And if you want to do that, then you should do it.
Right.
But you have to take what comes along with it, and listen, I'm just saying that, because I'm listening to you, and that's how my mind is translating, what you say, that, listen, I've always thought, this is not I'm not making a quote or anything like this, but I have always imagined if somebody came up to Langston Hughes and said, why do those, white people hate us so much? I imagine Langston Hughes' answer is, well, because they don't know how beautiful it is to be colored, because there's all these terrible things. Yes, sir, that's happening, stuff like that. But I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't go and say, well, I want to be that guy, with that power in that place. I said, no. Because where I came from was really love.
Yes. That's it. That's perfect. That's perfect. That literal silver spoon that you speak of in the mouth of Donald Trump is nothing but poverty.
Yeah.
And the silver spoon that was in my mouth were the stories of my grandfather, and the stories of my uncles who went to World War II, and the stories of my aunts who could bake a pie, and they don't even know how they got the ingredients for this pie because nobody had the money for it. And sitting on that porch and listening to those stories of how my folks made a way out of no way is my silver spoon. You're absolutely right. That's a perfect analogy. And that's why poets and writers have to keep inserting themselves, their lives, their histories, their families, their idiosyncrasies, the things they don't do so well into the fabric of America, like we have been doing. Speak of Langston Hughes and you just read the essay, the Negro artist and the racial mountain. That's what he was talking about. He was like, Black, don't you dare not want to say that you are a Black poet, because you think being a Black poet is something inferior. There is a richness there that nobody can take from you when you understand all that you come from.
No, I think it's really true. But then that also brings up the problem. There are people who were brought up not in the lap of love. Black people, white people, all these people. And how does one say to them, look, if you could just drop, these chains on you, then we have a chance.
And Walter, Baldwin said that. He said, we keep talking about what racism, the violence that racism presents to Black people. And he said, but the violence that racism reverberates Black on white people is just as destructive in a different kind of way. Mm-hmm. And that is so true. What it takes for you as a white person who practices racism to hate me, to hate Black people, to hate anybody that's not like you is such a destructive human thing. It takes your soul away. It takes your smile away. It takes your soulful silver spoon away and makes you think that there is only one kind of silver spoon, which is such a myopic, short range understanding of that definition and of that word. It does not allow you to see the universe. It does not allow you to take your eyes off your feet and look at the cosmos and everything that is going on there and be amazed at that. It only allows you to think about hatred and corruption and power and how anybody who doesn't look like you or think like you is inferior and should be attacked or brutalized or all those words.
Or just hated.
Just hated. But also there's an action to hate. There's an action that comes with it. Hate is just like, I hate you. You can just say that. But there's an action that comes with hate. And that's a real thing, too. That's a very, very real thing.
Yeah. No, these questions, these thoughts, I've been asking myself these questions anyway. When Paul Holdengraber called me up and said, well, take this over for a week and see what you can do with it. I was already thinking like, well, what is, I want to be happy. I want I want to wake up in the morning and run out into the kitchen with my father making breakfast and say, hey, Dad, what are we doing today? And I want him to, smile when he sees me. Because that's the most wonderful thing.
Yes.
First thing is that there's food to have breakfast with. I get that. But, after that, there's the love that food is a metaphor for. You know what I mean? It's like you're being cared for and loved, and I want everybody to feel like this. I know that, I live in a country, in a place and time that has the potential for really an amazing culture.
Yes.
And we just have to turn a quarter turn to the left to see it. Right. And that seems to me to be the work that's there in front of me. It's in front of you. Some people do it, some people don't. But I don't know.
Walter, I have a question for you. I've been thinking about this for 48 hours. Now I need to put it into the airways. Can I ask you this?
What?
So that phrase, give me liberty or give me death. Mm-hmm. So I watched 2 days ago, white men holding those banners, walking, pushing, fighting into the Capitol. That was their. I felt like that was their theme, and I've been writing that in my journal book a lot. I've been like, "Give me liberty or give me death." And then I immediately had a flashback to Black Lives Matter, and to this last summer, the streets were filled with us. In the streets, talking about Breonna Taylor, talking about the long list of Black lives taken from this earth. And I thought, well, those folks, those Black people didn't have a banner that said, give me liberty or give me death. Mm-hmm. But that's what their bodies were saying to me. Mm-hmm. Give me liberty or give me death. And yet, when Black people, when white people have that phrasing in front of them, it's thought to be a thing of patriotism. It's thought to be a thing of honor. And yet when Black people say the same thing, literally with their bodies and their minds and their thoughts and their shouts, it falls on deaf ears. For the most part, it falls on deaf ears. And that has been the call. And I just wondered, do you see that? Is that an alignment that you see also, that you could understand? Because I'm trying to write something. I'm trying to make something of that. Do you see that analogy?
Well, I just begin with, I think it's wonderful to think it, to understand it, because, like, I mean, really, anybody who talks to me and they say, who do you think were, when we talk in a military way, and they say, who do you think were the greatest, soldiers, the greatest army of the 20th century? I said, well, I don't know exactly, but the Viet Cong were way up toward the top of that. And they I don't know if they ever said those words, but they lived those words. They say, we will fight the French, we will fight the Americans, we will fight anybody. We want our identity and our culture, and we will struggle for it until we have it. I just look at them. I remember once I went to HBO, this is like 20 years ago, and I said, I want to make a movie that says that thing. And they pretended that I hadn't said anything. They didn't say no. They just pretended that I hadn't said a word. I think that there are many people of all colors and genders who understand Black men and women going out there and saying, we're standing up for who we are. I think that one of the greatest heroes of the civil rights movement is Medgar Evers. Because Medgar Evers, he just went home every night. He got a house. He didn't go to Boston. He didn't go to New York. He didn't, he went home. And in going home, he was saying, give me liberty or give me death. Or, give me liberty or give me death. That's it. And if you need to kill me, all right. And Martin Luther King says the same thing. He said, I might not be there with you, But Martin left open the door to say, anybody who thinks like me is like me. So if you were white, if you were Chicano, if you were Vietnamese or Japanese or anything like that, he said, you think like me, you are me, And I think that's the place where I see a possibility of opening. Because there are a lot of, people, so-called white people. There's no such thing as white people, but, it's like, it's a made up race. There's no race of white people. But, I'm not going to ask what color they are. I'm going to say, well, what do they believe and what are they willing to do? Does that answer what you were saying, or did I go off on a tangent?
Tangents, I go off on tangents all the time I don't, I'm not linear. So that's, you're good in my question. I wanted to put it out in the air because I've been thinking about it a lot. I've been thinking about the kind of nihilistic world that has been sort of permeating the air, or words, nihilistic, the people in power who have been telling in so many words, in so many ways, that, life does not matter, that knowledge is impossible, that human values are baseless, and principles don't matter, and truth doesn't matter. And I've been thinking about how wound up these last 4 years I've been with, as Toni Morrison taught us, that you can't spend all your time reacting to madness. Because if you're always oh, you said that, let me say this, then you will never get your work done. I have work to do that doesn't involve that kind of thinking and feeling and acting in the world. And yet I am always pulled into it in my twirl, in my 360 degree twirl every day with I will do my work. That's why I get up very early, sit at my desk, no TV, no nothing, and feel what I want to feel on the page and write that. And then because I know when I go out in the world, I'm going to have to put my pugilist's gloves on and do a little round somewhere. And that's okay with me because I am a poet of my time. And I feel like I can't isolate myself from who I am and where I've been in order to, just write my little thing on a little piece of paper. I have to take into feeling and to thought what's happening in the world around me and my place in it and what I can do about it and how I can help and how I have to, react to it. So not always, but some of that is very important to me as a poet in 2021. Well,
listen, I think that's so true, and it's so important to know and to respond to. I just want to. It brings up this tiny little story. Of my mother was Jewish, family, from Russia and the satellites of Russia, and my father's a Black man from Louisiana, and her aunts and uncles, there was Fanny and Abe and Chaim. They all lived in Santa Monica, and we used to go visit them sometime. And my father had a great time with them, and they loved my dad, And one of the reasons they did was the world they came from was so similar to my father's. They came, from slums and ghettos and shtetls. They were burned and hung and otherwise murdered. They couldn't vote, were considered a different race, were made fun of for the way they spoke and the way they lived. And so talking to my father was like, you and I, we had the same experience, and, it's not the same experience, but it's close enough, that you can jump that gap and say, yeah, you're right about that. We did. And that's, I think, when you, in the beginning of this conversation, you were talking about complexities. That's one of the complexities. A lot of people come up to me today in America and say, well, those were white people. Now, they knew they weren't white people. They knew it because white people were trying to kill them. White Christians were trying to kill them in Europe and managed to kill millions. And so when they looked at my father and talked to my father, they understood a connection, a similarity. And I think that one of the things that poetry does is poetry at its best delineates that similarity. It's not like, well, I mean, a white person might say, well, I'm white, so I do this and that. But a poet will not say that. A poet will say, I think, look, this is what humanity is, and this is what we need. If you're outside of that, then that's your decision. You kind of have exorcised yourself from the experience of being human. I don't know. I'm thinking, and I've always thought that. I always used to think that just in that family, and they were so wonderful, I mean, and it was like, and they say, well, somebody might come to me and say, well, you have to hate these people because, they're something that I know they're not. And I'm going, well, I can't do that. I can't do what this other group is doing to me. Because they don't know who the fuck I am. Right.
I have to stop. I have to stop this, this separation. I have to take this, what are those things they put in the street and they say, you can't go any further than this. This is your, the little side horse. And they say, okay, this is my little territory. No, there is a big human territory that belongs to me. And I will cross this line. I will go farther than you think I should go. That is the thing that I push. Sometimes my students in the undergraduate courses don't really understand how they have boxed themselves in, how they have allowed a country, a time, a region, names and descriptors to tell them that they can't go beyond that to, fly into the larger world and take their small town experience, but their big humanity with them. And that is what I mean by the beauty and the complicatedness of what we do, and to not keep your eyes on your feet, but to raise your eyes to the stars.
Well, that sounds like a good place to end this. I think we went over our half hour, but that.
I think we did.
No, we can have an hour. But anyway, listen, that was just wonderful. I mean, it was great to be able to.
Thank you for thinking of me, and thank you for including me in this.
Well, you're one of my favorite poets.
Well, I want to say this. I will never forget that moment that you were talking of when I was reading, and it was really the first moment. It was in New York. It was in the theater at the. I can't remember that. But I looked up and I saw you.
Oh.
I said, what is Walter Mosley doing at my reading? We had not met. You just were at the top row there, and I saw you, and I was so glad that I had I had some family from New Jersey who was also there, and they teased me. They said, "Oh, you must really be doing something well. Walter Mosley came a long way to hear and see you." And I just, the affirmation, you know, how you have supported young writers and how you have always included us in dialogues and in moments of you know, that only, you know, that when people reach a certain place in their life, and this has just been taught to me, you have to reach back. And it's the Harriet Tubman tradition. You have to reach back and get somebody who's coming behind you and open the door for them. That is a tradition that I was born in. That is a tradition that I live in. And you were one of the first people in my life who had crossed into that other realm to do that to me. And I just want to say thank you for that. I am deeply appreciative.
To support this show and Dublab's progressive programming, go to dublab.com/support.